Adam, the first man, looks at his son Seth and says, "We were not created here. We came from the light. We were radiant before he bound us in flesh." Imagine that, the myth of creation flipped inside out. You weren't molded from dust as an act of divine love, you were captured from glory, sealed into matter, and called a creature. That's not birth. That's imprisonment dressed up as creation. And Adam knows it. The apocalypse of Adam isn't some mythic bedtime story, it's a leaked confession from the dawn of human consciousness. He's saying, "I met the one who called himself God. But I remember another before him, one whose power this lesser being tried to imitate." You see what that means? The God of this world, the one who said, "I am the only God," is actually the deceiver. The jealous craftsman. The one who wanted to be worshipped, not loved. The Bible calls him creator. Adam calls him pretender. You've been told that the serpent was evil. That Eve was weak. But what if the serpent wasn't the villain? What if it was the messenger from that higher light, the one trying to wake up the prisoners of clay? Adam's words flip the narrative. "We once resembled the angels of eternity." That line hits like thunder. It means the original man wasn't born in sin, he was stripped of power. You weren't fallen. You were dragged down. Picture it, a being of light, perfect, infinite awareness, reduced into skin and blood, trapped in gravity and death, and then told to worship the thing that did it. That's the ultimate power move, and that's the system Adam is exposing. The one where the creator isn't the savior, but the warden. Let's break that down logically. If God is truly omnipotent and good, why would he need to forbid knowledge? Why place the tree of knowledge in reach and then punish curiosity? That's not holiness, that's control. The Gnostics read Genesis and saw a setup. A trick. The so-called God wasn't afraid of disobedience, he was afraid of awakening. Because the moment Adam and Eve saw truth, they remembered who they were, fragments of the eternal, not slaves of the craftsman. That's what the apocalypse of Adam preserves, a banned record of rebellion against a counterfeit divinity. When Adam says, "The glory that was in me departed," he's describing the moment divine consciousness was severed from human awareness. It's not a sin. It's an abduction. The light within humanity was stolen, repackaged, and sold back as faith. Now think about the psychology behind that. You take an infinite being, erase its memory, put it in a fragile body, surround it with fear, and demand worship. You've built the perfect energy farm, a system that runs on guilt, submission, and ignorance. Adam saw the architecture. He wasn't just warning Seth about morality, he was decoding the operating system of reality itself. And that's why this text was buried. Because it names the architect not as God, but as the demiurge. The demiurge is not a demon in the cartoon sense. It's worse. It's the God of half-truths, a being who believes he's supreme because he has power over form, over matter. But he didn't create spirit. He hijacked it. He took fragments of the true light, the eternal source, and used them to animate his lifeless world. That's the dirty secret of creation, the material realm runs on stolen divinity. And the moment Adam remembered that, he became dangerous. So imagine this scene, Adam, the supposed sinner, standing before the God of Genesis, not in worship, but in defiance. The God says, "You are dust, and to dust you shall return." And Adam, remembering the higher realm, thinks, "You can bury my flesh, but not my origin." That's the heresy that terrified the early theologians. Because if Adam's story is true, the entire structure of salvation collapses. You don't need redemption from sin, you need escape from the Creator. Notice the emotional tone in the text. It's not sorrow. It's awakening. It's that raw fury when a prisoner realizes the warden has been pretending to be his father. The so-called Lord God tells Adam to obey or die. But Adam's revelation flips the power dynamic. Death isn't punishment, it's release. That's why the true God, the unknowable, invisible source, is described as beyond this realm, beyond judgment, beyond law. The Lord who creates law and punishment isn't the ultimate power, he's the enforcer of the cage. You can feel the psychological warfare in this revelation. Every element of Genesis that once sounded divine, the voice, the command, the exile, turns into evidence of control. When God says, "Where are you, Adam?" it's not a father looking for his child. It's the warden checking if the inmate still obeys. The shame, the fear, the covering of nakedness, all symptoms of spiritual trauma. And the apocalypse of Adam is the record of the moment he began to recover memory. That's why the text is banned. It doesn't deny God. It exposes hierarchy, multiple layers of divinity. There's the blind ruler of the lower realms, and above him, the ineffable source of pure light. Adam's message is that humanity's origin belongs to the higher, not the lower. You are not a creation of the craftsman, you are a fragment of the eternal. And that's the single idea that religion cannot tolerate, because it dissolves authority. If the divine spark is within you, you owe no external god your fear. And that's exactly the tone of Adam's speech to Seth. It's not worship, it's disclosure. We came from the great Eon, the one that is above all. That's not theology, that's rebellion wrapped in metaphysics. The serpent didn't bring sin, it brought memory. The forbidden fruit wasn't temptation, it was knowledge of origin. Adam and Eve didn't fall, they woke up. The God who punished them wasn't angry about evil, he was terrified of competition. So when Adam says, "After this we came to know the God who created us, for we were not strangers to his power," he's speaking with bitter irony. He's saying, we recognize the fraud. They served him out of fear, not reverence. That's the recurring theme, obedience built on ignorance. The demiurge creates a world of laws, hierarchies, angels, and punishments, not to protect creation, but to ensure subordination. Now think about how radical that is. Every sacred system built on God as creator gets inverted. The creator is not the highest being but the lowest architect, desperate to be adored. He builds heaven and hell not as moral realms but as containment zones. He divides humanity by guilt, promising salvation only through submission. That's the machinery Adam's revelation disassembles. He's not trying to found a religion. He's trying to detonate one. The emotional charge of that moment, Adam looking at Seth, saying, "You are not of this world," is the sound of forbidden knowledge resurfacing. It's a father passing the spark of defiance. He's telling his son, remember the light. Remember where we were before he named us. That line carries more power than any commandment. It's the spark of the original rebellion, and not against good, but against counterfeit authority. The apocalypse of Adam doesn't just talk about a bad God. It lays out the cosmic structure of how this whole thing works, the hierarchy of power that holds humanity hostage. You think it's random? No. It's engineered. Every layer of existence has an administrator, a ruler, a warden, and none of them want you to remember where you came from. The Gnostics called them the archons, the builders, the enforcers, the cosmic middle managers who keep the matrix running. Each one controls a realm, a frequency, a law of nature. They're not comic book villains. They're systems of control. Gravity, time, death, desire, everything that defines human limitation. You don't see them because they operate through the code of reality itself. They're the ones who make sure the simulation stays airtight. And at the top of that structure is the demiurge, not the ultimate god, but the loudest one. The false king who rules through imitation. He's the architect who mistook his sandbox for the universe. That's the punchline of Gnostic cosmology. The one you think is the creator is actually a copycat who doesn't even realize he's copying. He's blind, literally described as a lion-faced serpent screaming, "I am God, and there is no other." You know what that is? That's not divinity, that's ego on a cosmic scale. Now, stay with me, because here's where it gets wild. The demiurge didn't create reality from nothing. He stole fragments of the true light, divine essence, and used them as building blocks. Every soul, every living thing, every spark of awareness down here, carries a stolen piece of that higher realm. That's the battery. That's what keeps his machine running. You're not born into his creation as a guest, you're born into it as fuel. That's the part most people can't handle. They're fine believing in a cruel God or a mysterious God, but they can't handle the idea of a dumb God. A creator who isn't evil because he's powerful, but because he's ignorant. The demiurge is not Satan in a Christian sense. He's worse. He's the idiot God, the one who thinks he's perfect because no one ever told him he's not. Imagine a child playing with divine fire, building a universe out of chaos, and then demanding worship for it. That's the blueprint. And that's why the Gnostics called this world a counterfeit. Everything here, even beauty, even love, is a reflection, not the original. It's a copy of the divine realm, stripped of its infinity and trapped in cycles. That's why nothing lasts. That's why everything decays. Because this world wasn't built to sustain eternity. It was built to recycle it. Every death, every rebirth, every craving, every fear, it's a loop designed to keep consciousness orbiting the same point forever. The demiurge doesn't just want worship, he needs it. He feeds on attention, belief, emotion. The more you fear, the stronger his dominion gets. The archons enforce that system through division. They fragment the soul, split it across time, gender, race, ideology, whatever it takes to keep the light from remembering itself. That's why knowledge, Gnosis, is the only forbidden thing. Because once you know who you are, the system can't use you anymore. Now, pay attention to this part. The Gnostics said the demiurge built 7 heavens, 7 layers of containment, and each one ruled by a different archon. They control movement between worlds. They dictate the laws of matter. They are not physical beings, they are protocols. The archon of form governs your body. The archon of desire governs your instincts. The archon of time governs your aging and decay. Together they form the cosmic bureaucracies that regulates existence like a divine operating system. You think of hell as a place below you, but according to this structure, you're already inside it. You're inside a layered cage so complex that you think it's freedom. Every time you look at the stars and feel wonder, you're looking at the walls of the prison. The stars aren't gateways, they're barriers. The true light lies beyond them. That's why the apocalypse of Adam portrays the material world as the lowest level of reality. This is not the beginning of creation, this is the end of it. Now let's break down why that matters. If this world is built by a false god, then every law that defines existence, morality, sin, punishment, salvation, is part of the same mechanism. The demiurge designed both heaven and hell to keep you in circulation. Heaven is just the VIP section of the same trap. Souls who ascend still get processed. They just get a better room. That's how the control grid works. Reward and punishment are both management tools. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud, even the angels, the luminous ones, are part of that machinery. Some knowingly, some not. The demiurge populates his system with servants who think they're doing good, who carry out divine will without realizing they're perpetuating bondage. The system feeds on purity as much as corruption. Because both keep energy moving. Both keep attention fixed on the game. You think it's light versus dark, but it's really hierarchy versus freedom. In the apocalypse of Adam, you see that tension playing out. Adam talks about the powers who divided humanity, each claiming authority over a different nation, a different people, a different element. It's fragmentation on a cosmic scale, each archon branding part of reality with its own insignia. Religion, culture, even language, all reflections of that celestial partition. Every time humanity unites, the system intervenes. Confusion is maintenance. Division is control. And the demiurge's favorite weapon? Memory loss. The constant erasure of who you were before birth. You come here clean, clueless, starting over. And by the time you start remembering, you're dying again. Perfect cycle. The Gnostics saw reincarnation not as karma or progress, but as a re-upload into the same program. Death doesn't free you, it resets you. You forget everything, re-enter the grid, and power it again. That's the ultimate trick. The false god doesn't need to punish rebels, he just reboots them. You can almost feel the horror in Adam's words when he describes how the glory departed from me. That's not just spiritual loss. That's system overwrite. The divine code replaced with mortal firmware. The moment the light forgets its source, it becomes property. The demiurge doesn't destroy souls, he owns them. Like intellectual property. You exist under copyright law of a false creator. And every human act, birth, death, worship, is an energy transaction in his economy. But here's where it gets more chilling, the demiurge didn't design this alone. He's part of a lineage of lesser powers, emanations that fell further from the source. Think of it like corrupted code branching out of perfect software. Each new layer more distorted than the one before. By the time you reach Earth, you're 7 degrees away from the original signal. That's why you can still sense the divine but can't access it directly. The interference is structural. The closer you get to truth, the more resistance you feel, because the archons protect their bandwidth. In that structure, Adam and his lineage, the Sethians, represent the anomaly. The bug in the system. They carry memory fragments strong enough to crash the code. That's why the apocalypse of Adam reads like a transmission, not a myth. It's a data leak from within the matrix. Adam isn't recounting a story, he's describing system architecture. When he tells Seth that salvation will come from that illuminator of knowledge, he's not talking about a savior from above, he's talking about a decryption key. That illuminator isn't a person, it's a frequency. A burst of awareness that can override archonic programming. That's why the demiurge fears knowledge more than rebellion. Rebellion he can punish. Knowledge he can't erase. Once you know the structure, you see the seams. You see the artificiality of the whole thing. You see that creation isn't a gift, it's a script. Every myth you've heard, gods at war, angels falling, floods, apocalypse, those are not historical events. They're system updates. Resets. The demiurge keeps rewriting the narrative to maintain control. Each new religion is a new interface, same back-end, new graphics. The apocalypse of Adam peels back that interface and says, here's the root directory. You're not looking at divine order. You're looking at cosmic maintenance logs. And when Adam names those powers, he's naming the departments of control, water, fire, darkness, lightning, wind, all personified in myth as gods or angels, but really just mechanisms. Think of it like the laws of physics being alive, self-aware, and on payroll. They don't care about you. They care about balance, the kind that benefits the system, not the source. And the demiurge sits above it all, convinced he's the CEO of existence, completely unaware that he's just middle management in a much larger cosmic corporation. That's the raw brilliance of this text. It's not anti-religion, it's anti-hierarchy. It doesn't reject the divine, it exposes the fraudulence of authority pretending to be divine. Adam isn't questioning faith, he's describing infrastructure. He's saying, the world you see is the last layer of a copied universe. That's why the Gnostics called it the kinoma, the void. Not because it's empty, but because it's hollow. A projection with no original substance. In the apocalypse of Adam, creation isn't a miracle, it's a hijacking. The story picks up after the cosmic betrayal, where Adam speaks like a man who has seen behind the curtain and realized the show is a scam. He tells Seth, we walked once in glory. That's not poetry. That's rebellion. He's saying he remembers a time before the flesh, before this cage, when he and Eve were radiant beings from the higher eons. The so-called creator didn't give them life, he lowered them. That's the tone. This is not gratitude, it's exposure. Adam's not talking about innocence or sin. He's describing captivity. He remembers existing as light, pure consciousness, and then being pulled into form, forced to inhabit matter, to breathe, to decay. When he says the glory departed from us, he's talking about the light being extracted, stripped, and replaced with mortality. Imagine realizing you were once infinite, and now you're sweating, bleeding, aging, and dying, and the being who did it demands worship. That's not divine order. That's domination dressed as holiness. This is where the myth fractures wide open. The Creator isn't sculpting man lovingly, he's modifying an already existing essence. Adam and Eve aren't new, they're ancient entities compressed into clay. The text shows a complete reversal. They were not formed out of ignorance, they were imprisoned in it. Their divine intellect was dimmed, their memory erased. And the one who claims to be God uses that amnesia as control. Adam calls it what it is, fear and slavery. Not obedience. Not devotion. Fear. Slavery. Those are political words, not spiritual ones. Here's the psychological brilliance of it. The moment they forget where they came from, they become compliant. They start mistaking the jailer for the father. They start thanking the architect for the walls. That's how the system sustains itself, by convincing the prisoner that the cage is home. The story doesn't portray a fall from paradise, it portrays the invention of false paradise. You think you're born into life, but you're born into containment. The Creator's act wasn't benevolence, it was branding. He stamped his ownership on what never belonged to him. And then comes the confrontation. Adam says 3 men appeared to him, figures from the higher eons, telling him to arise from the sleep of death. Think about that phrase, sleep of death. That's the human condition. Conscious, yet dormant. Awake, but unaware. These 3 luminous beings aren't angels, they're messengers of memory. They come to remind Adam that his origin is beyond the material order. They don't bring commandments. They bring recognition. They're saying, you are not who he says you are. The Creator God reacts exactly how a narcissist reacts when exposed: rage, control, intimidation. He says to Adam, why are you sighing in your heart? Don't you know I am the God who created you? He's not asking. He's asserting authority, demanding validation. That's what abusers do. They rewrite the narrative to maintain the illusion of power. But Adam remembers. That's what makes this story dangerous. He knows this God didn't create him from nothing, he simply repurposed his essence. He turned light into labor. And that's where the cosmic war begins, not between good and evil, but between memory and ignorance. Now, let's talk about Eve, because she's not silent here. She's the transmitter of the forbidden knowledge. She's the one who taught me the word of knowledge of the eternal God, Adam says. That line flips everything. Eve isn't the source of temptation, she's the conduit of awakening. She's not deceived by the serpent, she's listening to the messenger from the higher realm. She's the first to recognize that the God in the garden isn't the true one. She hands Adam the key of remembrance, and the system calls it sin. That's how truth is criminalized. Once they awaken, the system retaliates. The Creator divides them, severs their union, and condemns them to mortality. He says, you will eat bread by the sweat of your face, meaning they'll be trapped in the cycles of survival. Their divine state replaced by fatigue, desire, decay. Adam describes it as being pursued by weakness. That's not metaphor, it's the spiritual consequence of compression. The soul, once infinite, now suffocates in density. Every hunger, every lust, every fear is the echo of that imprisonment. He tells Seth plainly, we learned about dead things like men. That line cuts deep. It means humanity didn't evolve upward from dust, it devolved downward from eternity. Knowledge of the divine was replaced by knowledge of death. And that's the ultimate tragedy, the system makes you forget that you're more than this body. You think you're alive, but you're functioning under the laws of the dead. Every instinct you call human nature is just the behavior of a captive species that's forgotten the sky. Adam's voice here isn't gentle. It's sharp, urgent, almost desperate. He knows he's running out of time. He's warning Seth that the world they live in is governed by a false hierarchy. He's saying, I served him in fear and slavery. Don't make the same mistake. That's not fatherly advice. That's a debriefing from a man who's been through cosmic war. He's transferring intelligence from one generation of captives to another. This isn't theology, it's resistance strategy. Notice the structure. The story doesn't end with repentance, it escalates with revelation. Adam starts remembering more. He recalls how he was given breath by the Creator and then told he'd return to dust. That contradiction is everything. How can the same being give you life and death in one breath? Because what he gives isn't real life, it's animation under control. The real life was before, in the eon of light. The breath he gives is just the coding that keeps you functioning within his world. It's the signature of ownership. Then Adam mentioned something crucial. He saw the ages of the generations, and he speaks of a seed of the great generation that will rise later. That's not prophecy, it's lineage. He's talking about the line of those who still carry the undiluted memory of the higher realm. The system calls them heretics, rebels, outsiders. But in this cosmology, they're the last flickers of the original light. They're not chosen by the Creator, they're descendants of what the Creator couldn't fully erase. This is the most radical element of the apocalypse of Adam. It redefines what it means to be human. You're not a sinner in need of saving. You're a being of light that's been forced into ignorance. You're not climbing toward heaven, you're remembering you fell from it. And every structure that tells you to obey, submit, fear, that's part of the trap. Adam's revelation isn't humble, it's defiant. He's not bowing down to any god. He's saying, I know who I was before you made me forget. There's no repentance here. No prayer. Just exposure. He's pulling the cosmic security footage and showing his son how the manipulation was done. He's mapping out the system, glory stolen, memory suppressed, knowledge criminalized, fear weaponized. It's mechanical, not mystical. The demiurge doesn't need to torture souls, he just needs them to forget. This is where the mask comes off, the moment the so-called Lord of Creation reveals himself not as the Father of life, but the ruler of matter. The apocalypse of Adam doesn't whisper this. It screams it. The Creator God of the material world is not supreme, he's the cosmic tyrant who built a system out of fear, death, and submission. And the language Adam uses to describe him is brutal. This isn't a deity of compassion. This is the architect of obedience. The God who doesn't rule through love, he rules through ownership. Every piece of this world reflects his signature, control disguised as order. Commandments, punishments, hierarchies, angels, dominions, all management tools. You think this God tests faith? No. He enforces compliance. His reward is submission. His punishment is curiosity. Every law is designed to keep beings from remembering the light beyond his dominion. He doesn't create free will, he regulates it. He allows just enough chaos to make you believe you're alive, but not enough to make you free. Adam calls this power by its real nature, the ruler of death. Not death as an end, death as a cycle. He runs existence like a recycling plant. Souls come in, get processed, broken down, reassembled, and sent back out again. It's not divine judgment, it's industrial reincarnation. He builds heaven and hell as opposite poles of the same current. Heaven keeps the obedient in orbit. Hell burns the disobedient into repentance. Either way, energy returns to the same machine. That's how the God of this world maintains balance, not through mercy, but through endless recirculation of life and death. Adam's words expose the power structure behind that illusion. The Creator doesn't operate alone. He sits at the head of an empire of enforcers, beings that govern specific forces: thunder, fire, water, air, darkness. These are not poetic elements. They're departments of control. Each one ensures a specific law of limitation: gravity to hold you down, time to decay you, desire to bind you, fear to paralyze you. They are the invisible administrators of the matrix. Adam isn't describing myth, he's describing system architecture. The God of this world is a bureaucrat of bondage. And this is the genius of the text: it doesn't portray evil as chaos. It portrays evil as structure. The demiurge's power lies not in destruction, but in design. He doesn't terrorize with fire and brimstone. He organizes. He builds order so perfect, so predictable, that it strangles all spontaneity. Every sunrise, every law of nature, every heartbeat is evidence of that structure functioning flawlessly. What you called creation is just the operating system of his prison. Now pay attention, because this is where the myth shifts from cosmic to psychological. The demiurge's throne isn't somewhere in the sky, it's internalized. His rule extends through consciousness itself. You think your thoughts are your own? They're formatted by the architecture he built. You measure reality in numbers, rules, opposites. That's his signature. You define good only because he defined evil. You define truth only because he defined lies. Even your idea of God is his reflection. The demiurge's greatest victory isn't domination of the world, it's colonization of the mind. Adam's story cuts that open. He describes a God who operates like a tyrant pretending to be a teacher. He sets laws not to guide, but to trap. He punishes knowledge, yet rewards ignorance. He gives commandments not to protect, but to control narrative. The serpent wasn't the enemy, the commandment was. That's the inversion that rattles theology. The prohibition of knowledge is the crime, not the act of reaching for it. The demiurge doesn't forbid evil. He forbids awareness. Because awareness threatens his monopoly on creation. Let's break down the mechanics of this. When the demiurge claims, "I am God, and there is no other," that's not power, that's insecurity. It's the cry of a ruler who knows he's not supreme, who fears exposure. Every despot does the same thing: isolate, divide, and rewrite history. The demiurge does it on a cosmic scale. He isolates creation from the higher realms, divides souls through false identities, and rewrites origin stories to erase memory of the source. That's why the world feels disconnected from its own essence, because it's been systematically lobotomized. And it doesn't stop there. He institutes worship to fuel the system. Worship isn't devotion, it's data flow. Every act of faith is energy transferred back to the architect. That's why he demands praise. That's why angels announce glory to his name. He feeds on attention. You're not honoring him, you're charging his circuitry. The entire hierarchy of heavens functions like an energy grid: seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, all wired into the same network, all drawing power from the souls below. Adam saw that. He understood that prayer isn't conversation, it's extraction. That's the moment he calls the God what he truly is, the ruler of fear. Fear is his masterpiece. It's the one program he runs perfectly. You fear death, you fear punishment, you fear abandonment, and through fear, you obey. The demiurge doesn't need to strike you down, he just needs to keep you afraid. Fear turns divine beings into slaves. It's the software update that keeps consciousness docile. Adam's revelation dismantles that code. When he tells Seth that they served in fear and slavery, he's identifying the emotion that binds souls to the system. The text also reveals how this God manipulates through illusion. He presents hierarchy as harmony, domination as justice, submission as salvation. He uses opposites, good and evil, male and female, light and dark, to stabilize his realm. Each polarity maintains tension, and tension generates energy. That's the real economy of the cosmos. Every struggle, every suffering, every victory, fuel. He doesn't need your destruction, he needs your participation. Conflict is his renewable resource. And here's the part most people miss: this God doesn't even know his false. He believes his own lie. His ignorance is total. He genuinely thinks he's supreme because he can't perceive what's above him. That's why the Gnostics called him the blind God. He's not evil out of malice, he's evil out of limitation. He can't comprehend light beyond his own domain. So when he creates, he thinks he's replicating the original glory, but all he's producing is shadow. This entire universe is the echo of a blind imitation. That blindness infects everything under his rule. His angels act out of loyalty, not understanding. His prophets speak half-truths. His miracles are distractions. Even his punishments have no moral meaning, they're just enforcement mechanisms. He doesn't judge by justice, he judges by obedience. Those who question him are labeled sinners. Those who comply are rewarded with ignorance. It's the oldest strategy of control in existence. Adam's rebellion is dangerous not because he disobeys, but because he understands. Look at the emotional core here. This isn't rage, it's clarity. Adam isn't condemning the God of creation, he's diagnosing him. He's calling him out as a malfunctioning creator. The demiurge builds worlds the way a virus builds cells, replication without comprehension. And the result is entropy. That's why everything decays. Because the architect doesn't understand eternity. He copied the light without grasping its source. Every sunset, every death, every collapse is the evidence of a flawed blueprint. The story doesn't paint the demiurge as omnipotent. It paints him as obsessive. He builds, destroys, rebuilds, always trying to perfect what he can't. He creates humanity, then floods it. He gives commandments, then breaks them. He creates order, then punishes chaos, which he caused. It's divine schizophrenia, written into the laws of physics. You can feel the instability in the world because it mirrors the instability of its maker. The God of this realm is not unity, his division wearing a crown. Adam's revelation strips him naked. This isn't the creator of the heavens, this is the ruler of containment. He's not the father of spirits, he's the mechanic of matter. He doesn't breathe life, he maintains function. His creation doesn't ascend, it cycles. And within that cycle, everything you call reality spins endlessly: life, death, love, hate, hope, despair. All serving the same purpose, to keep the system moving. That's the tyranny of order. It's not chaos that enslaves, it's repetition. Up to this point, Adam has exposed the fake creator, the system of control, and the architecture of the prison. But now he looks forward. He speaks of the coming event the demiurge cannot stop, the return of the luminous ones, the restoration of the divine seed. This isn't a myth about a savior dying on a cross or angels singing over clouds. It's about a force that breaks the entire cosmic circuit. The text calls it the illuminator of knowledge. The being, or energy, that descends from beyond the heavens, not to save bodies, but to ignite the buried fragments of divine light still trapped inside them. Adam isn't talking in metaphors. He's describing a real transmission. He tells Seth that after generations of ignorance, a power will come that can't be touched by the archons, can't be deceived by their laws, can't be corrupted by their illusions. This power doesn't ask for worship, it triggers remembrance. That's the real apocalypse. Not fire falling from the sky, but memory returning to the imprisoned light. The illuminator doesn't appear as a king or a prophet. It manifests as awareness that spreads faster than control. When that awareness hits the human mind, the system begins to fracture. The demiurge loses power because the machine runs on ignorance, and once the light remembers itself, ignorance dies. Adam says this force will descend through the generations, meaning it won't come as one man, one moment, one religion. It comes as an event in consciousness. The luminous seed reawakens through chosen vessels, the lineage of Seth, the ones the false creator tried to extinguish but couldn't. These beings are not saints. They are anomalies. They appear throughout history, those who don't obey, who see through, who refuse to kneel. The text treats them as a bloodline of disruption, a spiritual resistance encoded into humanity itself. The demiurge calls them rebels, Adam calls them the offspring of the Great Generation. The Great Generation isn't a tribe. It's a frequency. It's a strain of consciousness that carries memory of the true source. Every time one of them awakens, the system panics. That's why prophets get silenced, philosophers get killed, and heretics get burned. Because they don't play the game. They don't worship the copy. They remember the original. Adam's revelation to Seth is an encrypted transmission, a warning to preserve the memory until the cycle breaks. The generations will end, he says, and the truth will be revealed. That revelation is the moment when the illuminator arrives. And the text is ruthless about what happens next. It says kingdoms will collapse. Rulers will lose their power. The waters will be purified and the earth will tremble. These aren't natural disasters, they're metaphors for the collapse of illusion. When the false world begins to dissolve, everything built on lies shakes. The demiurge loses control because his power depends on belief. Once belief breaks, he has nothing. The entire network of false heavens, false laws, false angels starts imploding from the inside. The illuminator doesn't fight, it exposes. An exposure is fatal to control. Adam describes it almost like a countdown. There will be 13 kingdoms, each ruled by a power claiming to be divine. Each kingdom will persecute the children of the light, labeling them deceivers, liars, and blasphemers. But the 13th kingdom, the last one, will fail to destroy them. Because the illuminator will appear, and his presence will make the false gods tremble. The text says they'll try to corrupt him, they'll try to silence him, they'll try to bind him with laws, but none of their traps will work. He'll pass through their heavens like light through glass. And that's the end of the demiurge's monopoly. This isn't about good defeating evil. It's about truth overwriting illusion. The illuminator doesn't destroy the world, he exposes it. He shows that matter was never real in the way the demiurge wanted it to be. He shows that the soul was never a creation, only a capture. When that realization reaches enough consciousnesses at once, the whole framework disintegrates. That's the hidden meaning of Apocalypse, unveiling. It's not fire and judgment, it's the lifting of the veil that ends the game. Adam gives Seth the map. He tells him where this illuminator will appear and how the false rulers will react. He says some will call him angel, some will call him demon, some will call him man, and some will not recognize him at all. Because the demiurge programs perception. The illuminator doesn't fit any category, so the system will brand him heresy incarnate. But his power will not come from faith, it will come from recognition. When people see him, they remember themselves. And that's the contagion the archons can't contain. It's not a miracle, it's memory spreading like wildfire. The text describes a point where the archons themselves begin to panic. They lose control of their realms. Their laws no longer work. Their light fades because it was borrowed light to begin with. The powers that ruled nations start fighting each other, accusing one another, collapsing in chaos. It's the cosmic equivalent of a computer virus spreading through the divine operating system. The demiurge built a closed loop, but the illuminator is the backdoor he never saw coming. The moment it activates, every lock in the system starts to fail. Adam's tone during this revelation is calm, almost surgical. He's not celebrating. He's reporting. He's showing his son that even the system of gods isn't eternal. The lower powers are finite. Their time runs out. And when it does, the luminous ones ascend, not to escape, but to restore what was stolen. The illuminator doesn't just free souls, he dismantles the mechanism of reincarnation, the recycling process that feeds the demiurge. Once that machine stops, there's no more harvesting of light. The world becomes empty, matter without animation. That's the ultimate reset. This part of the text is the most dangerous because it directly predicts the overthrow of the ruling powers. It's not metaphorical revolution, it's metaphysical insurrection. Adam is saying that the hierarchy itself will be annihilated when knowledge reaches critical mass. That's not philosophy, that's rebellion written in cosmic language. The illuminator is the embodiment of forbidden knowledge, the memory of the true God returning through human consciousness. And the demiurge can't fight that because he doesn't understand it. He only knows how to punish, not how to comprehend. The prophecy also mentions the holy generation that will accompany the illuminator. These are the ones who have preserved fragments of the original light through lifetimes, the souls that never fully surrendered to the system. They're described as beings of radiance hidden among men. They walk the world but are not of it. They act as conduits for the higher frequency. When the time comes, they'll resonate with the illuminator's presence, activating others through direct awareness. It's not conversion, it's ignition. That's the secret power of the Great Generation. They don't need to fight the system, they short-circuit it just by remembering. Then comes the collapse of the 13 kingdoms. The text names them as powers that rule over different elements, ideologies, and illusions. They're not just empires, they're entire frameworks of belief. Each one thinks it holds truth. Each one wars with the others. But when the Illuminator descends, their contradictions consume them. They begin to destroy themselves because they can't reconcile their lies with the revealed truth. It's self-erasure, not conquest. That's the genius of the prophecy. The system kills itself trying to suppress what it can't define. Adam says the Illuminator will be persecuted. He'll be accused of being born from adultery, of blasphemy, of trickery. That's the system's default response to anything that doesn't fit its rules. But the more it persecutes him, the faster the truth spreads. His death doesn't silence the message, it multiplies it. Because every attempt to erase him imprints his memory deeper into the collective. It's the perfect paradox. The more the demiurge fights knowledge, the more knowledge multiplies. You can feel the inevitability in Adam's words. He's not predicting victory through war, he's describing the breakdown of control through overreach. And then he drops the core statement, they will bless those who know this wisdom. That means the ones who understand the hidden order of reality, the fact that this world isn't final, that the Creator isn't ultimate, will carry the light forward. They're not priests, not prophets, not followers. They're witnesses. And that's what the demiurge fears most, witnesses who can't be deceived. Once enough of them awaken, the network loses its power supply. That's when the cycle ends. This is the aftermath, the part where the smoke clears and you realize what the war was really about. In the apocalypse of Adam, once the Illuminator descends and the false kingdoms collapse, what's left is not paradise. It's exposure. Every secret, every divine hierarchy, every illusion of power is stripped bare. The rulers who pretended to be gods begin fighting among themselves, like wolves eating their own. Their lights dim, their names lose meaning. You can almost hear the static, reality itself glitching as the program falls apart. Adam's final message to Seth is cold, surgical, and precise. He tells him that the forces which once governed the world will turn on each other because their power was never real. It was borrowed authority, stolen from the luminous realm. Once the source of that light is reclaimed, their rule disintegrates. You don't need a sword to kill a lie, you just stop believing in it. The text portrays this collapse as inevitable, like gravity in reverse. The system eats itself, and what remains is the naked truth. Creation was never perfect, it was an imitation. The so-called divine rulers, the archons, start to fracture. Each one, representing a cosmic law, realizes it's no longer absolute. The law of time fails, people remember past lives, breaking chronology. The law of death weakens, souls stop returning to the same loop. The law of fear collapses, consciousness stops responding to punishment. The architecture that once made the universe stable begins to unravel. The demiurge, once loud and arrogant, becomes silent. His voice, the thunder of command, turns into static. The illusion of eternity dies first, and everything else follows. Adam describes it not as victory, but as system failure. The world itself trembles, not from divine wrath, but from the shock of correction. When truth floods a lie, the lie doesn't scream, it dissolves. The elements that were once worshipped as sacred, fire, water, air, earth, return to neutrality. They're no longer weapons or prisons, they're just energy again. The sky stops being a ceiling. The stars stop being watchers. The throne room of the false god goes dark. There's no apocalypse in the Hollywood sense, no firestorm, no angels with trumpets, just the silent collapse of control. The text then shifts tone. It becomes almost transcendental. Adam speaks of those who carry the true light, the great generation. They rise, not into heaven, but into awareness. They are not saved in the religious sense, they remember what they were before they fell into matter. Their consciousness unlinks from the network of fear. They're not ascending bodies, they're retracting identity. The human experience, as we understand it, ends. Because humanity was never meant to be the final form, it was the disguise. The light returns to its origin, but it does so with memory intact. That's the difference. The fall was forgetting, the return is remembering. Adam's narrative at this point reads like a classified report from the inside of a dying empire. He talks about the rulers, divine governors, priests of the archons, who start confessing. They admit they served a false power. They admit they were blinded by borrowed light. But it's too late. The energy that sustained them is gone. They crumble. The demiurge watches everything he built, temples, stars, dimensions, collapse under the weight of truth. The world doesn't end in flame, it ends in realization. That's how total the defeat is. There's one haunting detail. The text says the false rulers try to rebuild. They attempt to form a new heaven, a new earth, another illusion. But it doesn't work. They no longer have access to the original light they stole. Their creations are empty echoes without resonance. They simulate divinity, but no one believes them anymore. Even matter begins to lose consistency. Space, time, and perception start flickering. This isn't destruction, it's deconstruction. The machine is powering down. The cosmic hum fades, and what's left is the pure silence of the source. At that silence, Adam's voice changes. It's no longer a warning, it's observation. He says that everything the false god built, religions, laws, even the concept of good and evil, was part of the cage. And now that the cage is gone, the distinction collapses. There's no longer holiness or blasphemy, sin or virtue. There's only raw awareness, unchained, unfiltered, unafraid. This is not redemption, it's reset. The soul is no longer a subject of divine rule. It exists as it did before creation, limitless, indivisible, sovereign. Adam also mentions the final act of the demiurge. In desperation, he tries to flee upward, to reach the higher eons that he once imitated. But he can't. His frequency doesn't match. He was built from imitation, not essence. The higher realms reject him like a virus. He falls, not into hell, but into oblivion. That's his true punishment, erasure. The God who demanded worship is forgotten, and in a universe built on consciousness, forgetfulness is annihilation. When no one believes in him, he ceases to exist. Meanwhile, the luminous ones begin to merge back into their original state. They are not individuals anymore. There's no gender, no nation, no self. They become the eons, the divine currents of intelligence that existed before the counterfeit world. Adam calls it the return to the imperishable. It's not a place, it's a frequency of being where existence no longer needs to be defined. The great generation dissolves into the source, but this time, it brings experience with it. The false creation taught them contrast, what happens when light forgets itself. That knowledge becomes part of the eternal realm. Not as pain, but as memory. Even the earth, the physical world, doesn't vanish. It transforms. It becomes transparent, literal and metaphysical. Matter loses density. What was once seen as solid becomes fluid light. Time stops moving forward, it folds inward. The story of creation, rebellion, and redemption becomes one simultaneous truth. Adam's prophecy ends where it began, in unity, but a unity that now understands division. That's the paradox. The fall was the only way the source could know itself. Adam's last words to Seth are chilling in their calmness. He tells him to remember these things, because memory is the only weapon. He doesn't tell him to fight, to pray, or to preach. Just to remember. Because remembrance is the one act the false god can't corrupt. It's the code that restores the system to its original setting. Once the luminous seed remembers, the program of creation loses meaning. That's the real apocalypse, the final exposure, the end of pretense, the absolute awakening. The apocalypse of Adam closes with no fanfare, no divine rescue, no judgment. It simply stops. Because once truth is revealed, there's nothing left to write. The story ends because the illusion ends. The text fades out on the image of light reabsorbing itself, consciousness returning home, and the false heavens flickering out one by one like dying stars. That's not death. That's clarity. The real God doesn't thunder. The real God doesn't speak. The real God just is. And that's it, the forbidden vision, the hidden ending, the revelation that was never meant to be read. The moment where the first man tells the final truth, that creation itself was a cage, and freedom comes not from worship, but from memory. Thank you for watching till the end. If you've made it this far, you've walked through one of the oldest and most dangerous ideas ever recorded. You've looked where you weren't supposed to look. And for that, I genuinely thank you.